All right, week 2 content, the stages of human growth and development. We have the fetal stage. All the women that are expecting, that are anticipating, that are believing and hoping that their baby goes full term, or to the extent of being able to deliver their baby. How much of the time does that happen? When we think about how the miraculous nature of who God is, and the people that may be coming to you that are nervous. I can't tell you how many times I've had people come to me nervous, and as a result, if they've lost a baby, if they've heard about a miscarriage or a stillborn, it is devastating to walk along with somebody that has miscarried. And now the fear of them getting pregnant again, not getting pregnant again, what does that do for them? Because we understand that fear creates stress. The chemical is cortisol, and how that impacts the body and does a lot of different things. And so in that, knowing the stages of human development, we have the fetal stage. And of course, I'm going to kind of talk a little bit more about the dynamics of application and let the book really kind of drive home the points and really kind of the content from the standpoint of what is, but really from the standpoint, what does that look like for us? Is this an area that you want to counsel in? I know that we have a good friend that this is what she specializes in. And it is remarkable that she gets to help women. She gets to help couples walk alongside them as they are struggling, as they are devastated, as they are fearful. And so we have this fetal stage. We have the postnatal stage, we have infancy. We have a toddler, typically 1 to 5 years of age. We have childhood, which is 3 to 11 years. Typically, early childhood is from 3 to 8, and middle is from 9 to 11. We have adolescence and or teenagers, and we equate those from 12 to 18 years. We have adulthood. Okay, so within that parameter are going to be the population that you're going to see. Is it, our infancy going to be difficult, but are you working with moms who just had a baby that are dealing with the idea of just how do you take care of this baby? The idea of where are the instructions to this baby? What are the instructions to life? And how do I continue to keep a house going and my job and all these different dynamics? Are you going to be working as a child or play therapist to be able to help the toddlers, these individuals, early in their formation? Because there's so much of vastness that children learn from a theta brain frequency. And again, we have alpha, and we have beta, we have alpha, we have theta, we have delta, right? Delta is when we sleep, theta is when we're completely absorbed, alpha is kind of this peace oriented, and beta is what we're typically in. And as a result of that, this toddler type, they're usually in kind of this theta brain frequency. And so as a result of that, it's very equivalent to putting a sponge in a wet bucket and all of a sudden pulling the sponge out and there's no more water in the bucket. Why? Because it's all absorbed in the sponge. This is what this age group is like. The idea of them being in this theta brain frequency to the point that they are constantly absorbing. This could be the dynamic of why didn't I just tell you to clean your room? Why will you again? Are you finding yourself really kind of working more with these individuals that are in an older standpoint, whether it's early childhood or whether it's middle childhood from 9 to 11 years old, like I said, but so much of people that are in need in this area aren't there. Been working in this field for about 17 years. And one area that is difficult to find is people that will specialize or work with children to the extent that we need them to. So if this is your calling, if this is your heart, awesome, good for you. Adolescents and teenagers, if people do work with next generation, they typically find themselves usually opening up their books to work with this age group. And adulthood. Of course, this is where a majority of people work with. And a lot of times the reason why they don't like people are scared, I don't know if that's the right word, choose not to work with children, it's because there's a lot of legality along with that. The idea of if a minor if I have an individual that reaches out and it's for a minor, now I have to ask them this question to make sure, is there a divorce or a custody agreement that's, Brady, why would you ask that? Oh, it's just one of the things that the state of Texas asked me to ask. And so I apologize if I've offended you, but it's one of those things that I need to know just so that I'm not going against the divorce decree. And so in that, if there is, I've had people that have sent me all of the divorce decree except for the page that I needed to see. And then when I asked for it, they got mad. The one page that I needed to see who has the authority to get determined from a mental health standpoint, they didn't want to send it to me. Well, did you see him? No, I couldn't. And that's the hard thing. Or when one parent wants the child to get counseling and the other person doesn't, and the other person has equal say-so or has primary say-so to the point where, what do? You can't see them. Or do you see them? Again, you get to determine that, right? And so even adolescent and teenagers, they seem to scare us as counselors less, even though I spend a lot of time working with children about 5 to all the way up to 18. And so in that, children are great to work with if you're called to work with them. If you're called to work with them, it's amazing. It really, really is. So in that, why do you feel like in our field that more people want to only work with adults? Because they can actually consent to therapy. We don't have to be as concerned about the idea. Do they have consent? Is there any legality involved in them coming here? So these are the dynamics that you have to take into consideration when you are working with this age group. Now, again, if you are not a professional counselor or somebody that is within a professional counseling orientation, do you have to be concerned about that? But typically we have the fetal stage like we talked about, and then we have the postnatal stage. Factors affecting growth and development. We have genetic factors. It plays a primary role in growth and development. The genetic factors influencing height is substantial in adolescence phase. A large longitudinal cohort studies of 7,755 Dutch twin pairs has suggested that the additive genetic factors predominantly explains the phenotypic relations across the age for height and mass body index. And so what we're seeing through research studies is the dynamic of how genetics play a factor. And as a result of that, we get back to this correlation that, as you see within psychology, if y'all take an intro to psychology, or even if you haven't, but you're aware of this whole nature nurture. Is it biology, or is it the idea of conditioning that really establishes people? Well, again, there are people that will Brady 50-50, or they're 60-40. Okay, which one takes primary? There are theories out there like epigenetics will really kind of take this formation as a man believes in his heart so easy, as is he. The dynamic of what I believe here really orients everything down to the point of that I express it out. Well, is that very traditional, called it to behavioral therapy? You get to determine that. But the dynamic of what we see in so much of the time is genetics. Well, I want to throw this out there for you as you're thinking through this, because again, I'm not doing my job if I don't, because you may find individuals that have this philosophy, the idea that they were tied to mom and dad pre-Christ, but as a result of them becoming a believer, now their genetics are no longer tied to mom and dad, but they're tied to Jesus. So if that is the case, then what does that mean? And how do you counsel individuals whether they are pro or anti this philosophy? Again, going back to that dynamic of validating. Validate. Some of the other environmental factors that may play a beneficial or detrimental factor is the SES factor, which is the social economic factor. Children of higher socioeconomic classes are taller than the children of the same age and sex in the lower social economics group. Why do we think that is? And does that matter? Or is it just research? I mean, it really is interesting. Urbanization has positively influenced growth. The secular trend is observed in growth where the kids grow taller and mature more rapidly than the previous generation. The secular trend is observed significantly in developed countries like North America. And so the dynamic of that, okay, so if kids are growing taller and maturing more rapidly than in previous generations, then what research do we have that really shows the impact that this is causing neurologically, or is it causing an impact neurologically? And if it isn't, okay, then we have all this data from previous generations. But again, can we look at that if this generation that we're seeing is different than the generation that came? What does that mean? And could that be the dynamic if you have a mom that's bringing in a teenager and the mom understands the maturity and biology of what it was like when she was coming into womanhood? Now all of a sudden she's trying to project down and she sees her daughter in a different formation, and is that causing pain? Well, I don't know what's going on with her. She must be on something or doing something, because as a result of that, I don't remember hitting this stage so early, or whatever that looks like. And so when we can understand these dynamics and these type of research, we can help mom, grandma, whomever it is, and really allow them to take a deep breath and understand, hey, this is the reason why there is a difference. A family education level has a lot to do, can either positively impact on growth. The inadequate of emotional support and adequate detrimental status, including language training, might cause growth and development. The human-made environment influences human growth and development. The human-made environment influences human growth can develop significantly. Certain ongoing studies have proven the relationship of pollutants in sexual maturation, obesity, and thyroid functioning. The excess lead exposure significantly associates with low birth weight, noise population due to transportation source, also as an associated with reduced prenatal growth. Okay, so here we have is environmental factors. And so the dynamic of where a person lives based upon what they can afford, how much of that impacts these type of characteristics. And so when you find people that have certain characteristics, is that because their parents, their grandparents, the people that they're around, they had different type of education, thus creating a higher socioeconomic status? Now, again, I know people that have multiple degrees, and again, it's not always a correlation. But I think what you can see is the trend is typically that's the way it projects, is you have a higher education, thus you make more money. If you make more money, then as a result of that, you can live in areas that typically are more accommodating. And so in that, if it's more accommodating, typically we think about safety, we think about those type of dynamics. But what we're actually seeing is even the dynamic of pollutants within sexual maturation, have really correlated from the standpoint of talking about thyroid function. Well, why is thyroid function so important? It's this gland that really helps kind of balance our hormones. Well, Brady, why is that? Again, so many people are going to come in to see you and they're going to be stressed out of their mind. They're going to be anxious. They're going to be depressed. They're going to be angry. They're going to be rejected. They're going to be all these different things. And when people are coming in and they've pushed all this down, where do you think these emotions that get pushed down, where do you think they go? They go in. They impact the body. Can they impact to the dynamic of this gland that really balances hormones? So how do these type of dynamics impact that? Nutrition. Malnutrition plays a detrimental role in the process of growth and development. We've seen that within, if you've ever gone on a mission trip to certain third world countries, to actually see how nutrition or lack thereof really impacts the growth and development. The idea of feeding our body, because we're constantly feeding not only our mind and then the thoughts that we have, but also our bodies and how the body needs adequate nutrition. Deficiencies of trace minerals can also affect growth and development. Iron deficiencies usually affects psychomotor development and does not affect growth. Zinc deficiencies might cause growth retardation and or suppression and developmental delay. Other things that can also play a significant role are iodine, magnesium, and copper. So the dynamic of nutrition, what is it that a person's eating and how is that impacting not only their development, but also the dynamic of how that is correlated to the way they think. What we understand is the brain and the gut, how they assimilate and go hand in hand in a lot of ways. Some different countries, if you go and study, they actually call our gut the first brain and our brain actually the second brain. Why? Because there's so much that goes on in the gut. They actually believe that the vast majority of our immunity actually is in the gut. When people go into fight, flight, or freeze, and that cortisol pushes the immunity out of the gut into the limbs to get the person away from whatever it is that's dangerous. That's the reason why so much of the time people say, I don't know. I don't know what to do. Here's a situation that presents itself. I don't know what to do. And you'll hear somebody saying, well, what's your gut telling you? What's going on? What do you feel like your gut's telling you? And why is it that they would say, well, what was my gut tell? What? It's because there is a nerve that connects the brain to the gut, and it's called the vagus nerve. And what they've come to understand that it assimilates, and if you can stimulate it, then as a result of that, it's very combatant to stress. One of the ways that you can stimulate it is through this breathing technique called 6, 9, and 12. I know that there is the whole square of 4, 4, 4, 4, and a lot of people like that. And again, I'm not anti to that, but to me, understanding that I want these two areas to correlate, and we're talking about nutrition and how all the enrichment in minerals and vitamins and all those different things that supplements are the reason why people take supplements is because of where our food could be, making sure this is in alignment. But it's breathing in for 6 seconds. Holding for 9. And breathing out for 12. I like to do this within the people that I work with. What I usually like to do is saying, okay, hey, if it's anxiety, what I want us to do is the first round, go in 6 seconds, hold it for 9, and as you breathe out, imagine anxiety leaving your body as you breathe out. And a lot of times, it may be hard for them to breathe out for 12 seconds, but the more that they do it, the easier it gets. And then I say, okay, now as you breathe in, I want you to imagine peace coming in and filling your body. Now let's do that 3 times. 12 times. I don't know. Okay, just whatever that is. I'm looking at, let's see, growth or rapid weight gain in early childhood influences health in the later part of life. The correlation of what we do today and how it impacts us tomorrow. The data in early childhood has strong association with the likelihood of obesity later on in life. A lot of the things, well, I don't know to the extent of how this individual got this way. And a lot of times we sit there and say, well, what have you been eating, the last week? But again, it could be even to the point of what they were eating in the earlier time. There's an early protein hypothesis states that lowering the protein supplies during infancy helps achieve normal growth and reduce obesity in early childhood. This concept of the early protein hypothesis helps in improving the food products for children, helping them understand the science behind things, the nutrition of things, the idea of really making sure the improvement of protein and how that impacts later on. Okay, so the idea of these things really play a role. Let's see. See if okay, I'm trying to think if I want to look at any of this, but really from the standpoint of what we see are the 2 stages of growth, right? The stages of growth in human development. You have fetal, postnatal, and then some of the factors that affect growth and development are these dynamics. But what about, okay, so if we go back and we really look at the fetal, the idea, there've been many times that I've ministered to counsel somebody that there was a pastor that I used to serve with, and one of the things that I know specialized was really in utero wounds, really going back and allowing the individual, and she'd walk the individual through what it was like week one, day one, week one. And she would walk you through all these, through the process of assimilating God into the picture. And I remember counseling an individual or ministering to an individual, and I kind of felt like we needed to go there. So I asked her, I said, hey, would you come in and lead this session? And I got to see her in action, and it was outstanding. But the dynamics of in this fetal time, what a mom thinks, what she feels, what she says, and how it can be felt by the baby. Wow. Well, Brady, why are we pausing here? Because I want to let that dramatic pause really kind of resonate within us, because there's so much. And as these babies get to be 30, 40 years old, oh wow, first thought, my mom didn't even want me. Okay. How do we counsel? How do we help those individuals? And by knowing the financial factors, the family characteristics, like education, like nutrition, things like that, they can actually be positively and or negatively as a result of that. Because does it impact their development? And then how does it impact who they are? If human development is about them deciding who they want to be, what they want to do, and how they want to live, the idea if conditioning takes place, and so much about our learning is observational, us observing those who went before us, and as a result of that, we're assimilating because of this theta brain frequency to the point that we're absorbing everything that's inside, that we're experiencing. What is it that we're getting? And we see this play itself out in the dynamic of generational iniquities, how they can either be observed and or attached. And I think a part of the dynamic is when we observe them to the point that we actually make a belief and or assimilation in our subconscious beliefs, the idea that if it was like this for mom and dad or whomever it is, then it has to be like that for me. Or I don't know how it could be any different as a result of seeing mom and dad struggle. Or I've seen mom and dad thrive, so therefore it's easier for me to believe, because as a man believes in his heart, so is he. As a person believes in the heart, so that are they. And so in that, as we see the impact of these children learning to continue to evolve in the way that God created them, the dynamic of how these different factors can play a role in the premise of them sitting before you, to the extent of why they believe what they believe, why they think the way they think, why they want what they want. And so much of our counseling, you hear, and it's kind of jokingly, I remember my son, my middle one, he's like, Dad, I want to do what you do. And I'm like, oh yeah, you want to be a counselor? He's like, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And I thought to myself, I was like, I think he's setting me up. I think he's my one that likes to give me a hard time. Amazing, but likes to give me a hard time. So this ought to be good. I'm thinking this in my head. And I said, okay, son, why is it that you want to become a counselor? And he goes, well, don't y'all just kind of ask people, how does that make you feel? And so what are you going to do next? And I was like, real funny, but real funny. But in this, the dynamic of part of that is, so tell me about your mom and dad. Well, why do we have to hear about my mom and dad? Because so much about our moms and dads, caregivers, what we saw, we assort. What we hear, what we heard, we assort. Why Jesus said, I only do what I see the Father do. Because That is attuning. That is a physics-oriented word, right? To be into attunement. Why? Because we constantly are falling after, especially in this age group, around somebody. Brother, sister, typically mom and dad. That's why, you leave your shoes out, and what is it that the little kid's doing? He's trying to walk around in your shoes. Why? Because they want to be just like mom and dad or a caregiver. I used to do a lot within what we call kids freedom and really helping develop that. And I tell the team members when they go out to get the kids to bring them back into the session, hey, don't have anybody go get them. I want you personally to go get them. And when you do, I want you to spend just a few minutes talking with a caregiver, a few minutes talking with mom and dad, because that few minutes may actually give you some insight of why that kiddo that you're going to be seeing is the way that they are. Not that there's anything wrong with mom and dad, but the idea of just giving context. The dynamic of this is if you have somebody that, is 35 years old and they come up and they said, man, I was dirt poor all my life. And as a result of that, it may give you insight in knowing why they struggle the way they do. Or the idea of, hey, they're 44 years old and they never got great nutrition. And because of that, that impacts them significantly. Or whatever it may be. What do they believe? Or excuse me, who are they and what are they doing here? And in that, who are they? What is it they believe? If this is about deciding who they want to be, then what is it that they've experienced that has gotten them to this very point, that has attempted to communicate that to them at this point? And you get to be the caveat to help challenge that with sensitivity, with ambition, to get them from where they are to where they want to be. It comes with a lot of hard work, but this is an amazing field. And as we understand the context, as we understand the dynamics of these stages, and as we understand some of the factors that can impact the growth, like genetic factors, right? Like the dynamic of a deficiency in copper. Like how that can impact their thyroid and their hormones and how that impacts them. So here we are, week 2. How does this impact you? To the point of seeing the people that come in saying, okay, what is it that you've experienced that has attempted to communicate who you are? And if those experiences have been pleasurable to the goodness of God and they've gotten great things that have allowed them to orient themselves to knowing who they are in Christ, awesome. Then how do they continue in that? And then what is our role in that? But if they haven't, and those negative experiences have attempted to communicate something about them, to them, that have them questioning, that have them doubting, that have them in disbelief, then what is our role to help them to be challenged so that therefore they can move forward from that place after you've interacted with them, that place moving forward where their lives can be dramatically different? What did their past attempting to communicate to them? What is the present and his presence want to communicate to them so that therefore their future can be walked out in the dynamic of what happens in that present point within his presence? Week 2, here we are. Hope you're enjoying the reading. Again, like I said in the first post, if you have opportunity to help other students with the content, please, or within the reading, please make yourself available for that. I'd greatly appreciate that. When I get my secondary book, I'll make sure to digitize all that for y'all, so you have that. And that's week 2. Have a great day. Can't wait to read your discussion board. Have a great day. Bye-bye.